Welcome to the workshop on part two of our three-part paper for fall semester of 2023. Those of you in future semesters viewing this video, most will still apply, but do check your syllabus for any changes that might have occurred during that time span. Well, here's our agenda for this evening. First of all, would like everybody to check in so we can give you credit for being here. And you can enter a word or words that describe how 702 has been treating you thus far, or you can just enter present. And your word will be prefaced by your name so that I'll be able to give you credit for being here. So in the chat room, yes, please enter words that describe how you're feeling about 702 thus far. Or if you choose not to answer that, then just enter present and I'll know you're here. So what is expected in part two? We are going to go in depth into it, but just to give you an upfront generality, we're going to ask you to present the data that you've been collecting, or if you haven't been collecting it, I'm sure you're starting in the next day or two, collecting numerical information, quantitative data on that target behavior that you defined in part one. Then you're going to make sense of what it means. Like, well, what can we imply? Are there any conclusions that can be drawn from your collection? We're also asking you to engage and talk about two classroom assessments: the ABC analysis of an incident, the B standing for behavior, the A, what happens just before that behavior? What's setting it off? What's the antecedent? And the C that follows the B, the consequence that follows the behavior. We know that's what's maintaining the behavior. That's what's keeping it going. That's what's the payoff. The ABC analysis is superficial in that it looks just at what we can observe, but there's a lot more going on inside the student. And while we won't be addressing the many ways that that can happen, if you're in our behavior disorders program, we do get into assessing internal states of kids whose behavior and such is of concern to us. But we'll just be looking at the mistaken goals analysis, a way of um, not pinpointing, but finding a general purpose for why it is that that student is displaying that recurring behavior pattern. And once we've talked about what's in part two, we'll head off into our breakout rooms with yourself and a couple of other people. It'll be a chance to share your working document. Is there a part of it that you're struggling with and you could use some feedback? Are there parts of which you're especially proud and you think sharing it with others would benefit them? Yeah, it's a chance to just sit down with your fellow educational wizards and share that wisdom. Right, so if you're looking for more detail on what's involved in part two, most of you have already seen this. We know to go to Blackboard, to click on, of your selection of classes there, click on SPED 702, and in the left sidebar, you'll see the CAB MR assignment title. You click on that. You scroll down to the CAB MR and the descriptions of the assignment parts and select the link for part two. And so let us then go there and take a look also at the exemplars that we can emulate for part two. There we go. And just to follow up on that slide, and then we'll address the question. We go to SPED 702, scroll down that left sidebar, and there it is, CAB MR assignment. We click on that, and that'll take us to the description. a little bit of the generalities there and the scoring. And then we say, there's the description of the assignment parts, the three parts. We're looking down, there's frequently asked questions about part two that perhaps we have some questions, it's been addressed in there. But they're down there at the bottom because Blackboard won't allow me to place them in sequence. And so it's down there at the bottom. You can click on that and it will bring up all of the requirements, the criteria. It will also bring up some links to study materials and a document that you need to complete for the part two. So it's all there. So here are your challenges, a number of hurdles to jump. We want to engage in the data collection, which many of you have already begun, and a few of you will be getting started. And collecting that numerical information regarding the target behavior that you defined in part one. And then you're going to make sense of this collected data by putting it in some sort of visual form, a graph, a chart, a grid. We'll be addressing each of these points you see on your screen more in depth this evening as we move through the various slides. You'll make some sense of that data that you've collected, not just the numerical data, the numbers, but also what else you know about the student, what's referred to as being qualitative data, that other information. And you'll write up your thoughts regarding what all of this means, the qualitative and quantitative information. What does it tell us? What are our what does it imply? What can we conclude from the collection of this data? Realizing that you haven't engaged in an intensive collection of the data, chances are our assignment is to give you the opportunity to learn about what it is you're going to use out there in the schools. Because when our Committee on Special Ed is conducting a functional behavior assessment, trying to figure out the purpose, the reason, the cause, the function behind the behavior, they're going to be asking for all sorts of information, qualitative information like work products, scores, your personal perceptions, your anecdotal notes, and they'll also be asking for quantitative data, the data you've been collecting for this part two, because the Every Student Succeeds Act and the most recent IDEA, Individuals with Disability Education Act, require that our committees that meet on students engage in data-based problem solving and data-based decision making. Thus, why we've included data recording in our SPED 702 class. Also in this paper, you're going to devise a behavioral objective. What do we think we can accomplish with this student in the next few weeks or next month? Not a long-term goal, but a short-term objective. What's plausible? What might we be able to accomplish with regards to helping our student make better behavior choices? And then we're going to ask you to apply a cornucopia of different interventions. And we'll address each of these points as we move forward. Yes, Xinyi.
Professor, so actually I'm facing a problem. It's like I did my part one like a while, I completed my part one like earlier than the deadline, so it's a while back. And then and I left this country. I went back to Taiwan, and so when I come back, and the student's situation has been changed because student has been medicated. And so the behavior pattern just changed. And
Okay, then that's something that you and I should be talking about
Later.
individually
All
because
right.
it's an individual problem.
Mhm.
And certainly, yes, I remember that you were out of the country, and I know now things have changed. So I will be extending my office hours tomorrow to be
Mm.
from 6 to 9 o'clock. And also, I'm willing to meet with folks just about any time that the two of us have a free moment so we can arrange a Zoom chat and make sure that everything is operating the way it should. Or you
Mhm.
can stay after class tonight and we'll talk
Sure.
more.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Thank you.
All right. So let's then address each section individually. Yes. After you, and this is after an introductory section and that's in the description of the assignment that's on Blackboard. But I need to know about the student. You can cut and paste that from part one, or you can summarize it. I just need to recollect the student and say, oh, yeah, I remember reading that. And I'll also need your um, target behavior. So again, I know I'm back up to speed with regard to your student. And then after that, you are going to tell me about how you collected your data. Yes, you were using event recording or maybe partial interval recording, maybe duration recording. You'll tell me about that and exactly how you engaged in it. Were you doing so while you were teaching and in the front of the room or roaming around? Or were you sitting in the back of the room? Were you using some sort of electronic device, some digital device, or were you using good old pencil and paper? How long were you observing during your observation periods? Was it 17 minutes one time and the full 42 minutes of a class session another time? Or was it always for 15-minute intervals? Mhm. And if you used interval recording, full interval recording, or partial interval recording as your procedure for gathering data, how long were your intervals? Was it every 5 minutes that you were making a yes mark, the behavior did occur, or a no, it did not? Was it 2 hours? Was it the whole day? How often did you query yourself as to, gee, did the behavior happen, yes or no, during that time span? Okay. And which marks did you use for yes and no? Was a yes a star? Was it a plus sign? Was it a check mark? Was the no a minus sign? Was it, just let me know which marks you used. If you were using event recording for frequency, the number of times the behavior happens, chances are that you were using tally marks, but if not, let me know. And so, right now would be a good time for you to enter into the chat which recording procedure you used as we continue to monitor the attendance here this evening. So, which recording procedure did you use or will you be using? Mm, I see frequency recording was quite popular. All right. And then typically in our reports, in fact, for this particular assignment, yes, that you're going to put your data into some pictorial sort of form, some image, a chart, a graph. It could be a line graph, as in the upper right hand corner. It could be a bar chart down in the bottom. And if you happen to have your original data recording sheets, as you see here, Mrs. Jade and was observing DS and hitting herself. I would love to see that too, but I do need to see a graph a chart, some sort of image. Then you're going to make sense of your data. You're going to explain it to the reader. Both the quantitative data, the numbers, and also what you know about the student, other information, the qualitative, and some questions you can consider you will find there. Like, if the numbers did vary from day to day or class to class or time of day, why do you think that might be? Maybe it has something to do with the subject matter and the student's interest in it. Might it have something to do with the relationship with the teacher? And even though you've only been observing one student for this, you know kids of that age. And do you see that this focus learner is showing the behavior, the target behavior, at a different level, at a different degree than your typical student of that age? And here's the behavioral objective part, which you'll find to be very similar to defining a target behavior. Again, the wording has to be precise and professional. It needs to describe what you can observe, what you see, what you hear, what you feel, observable and measurable. So you think, okay, what would I like to accomplish with this student if I were to intervene? For most of you, this will be hypothetical. Mm. What do I think I could accomplish in a couple of weeks if I decided to intervene with this student? Where would this student be at that particular point? And we've got an example down there at the bottom. There are four parts to a behavioral objective. The when you're going to observe, or under what condition, not observe, under what conditions will this behavior exist a couple of weeks from now? Oh, during the morning meeting. Okay. Who is our purpose? Who is the person that we hope will make better behavior choices? Who's the actor, the focus learner, the audience? Oh, Tyrese. Mhm. And then the behavior that we will see a couple of weeks or a month from now will remain in seat. Yeah, that's a little bit vague, though. I mean, if a student's sitting up on the back of the chair and has the feet set on the horizontal plane where typically the buttocks are, is that still in seat? Or when we say in seat, does it have to be 1 foot on the floor? Like what exactly is in seat? Oh, for this student, a couple of weeks from now, we just want the buttocks in contact with the horizontal plane of chair. Maybe in the previous week, we just wanted any part of the student's body in contact with any part of the chair. At least we've got the student, you know, in the learning area, you know, and but we think in a couple of weeks we can actually have him with buttocks in contact with the horizontal plane of the chair. And then, well, to what degree? Oh, 70% of the total time. In the document that you can access, the description of the assignment, there's a link or two that will lead you to more information on how to write a behavioral objective. But here's those four parts again, just to solidify this and have it sink in a bit more. We've got to have who's going to be doing that behavior a couple of weeks from now, what the student is going to do, that observable, measurable behavior, the target behavior for our behavioral objective. And under what circumstances will the student be showing this behavior? And how much of it, to what degree, to what level will it be done? Yes, it's what the student will do versus won't, the action verb, observable and measurable. And let's see how we do in identifying those four parts that are in the parentheses in red. Now, this is to yourself, unless you want to enter it into the chat, but you can just think to yourself, who is the actor, the focus learner, the audience? And you look into number one there, that behavioral objective. Who are we talking about? Ah, Kong Ting. What behavior will be shown? Oh, elopements, but fewer of them. So the behavior is, oh, and by elopements, we don't mean putting up a ladder out against the house to the second floor window and bringing your loved one down and running off. No, if in the educational realm, we're talking about moving through the classroom door before getting permission to do so. Observable and measurable. Yes, that student's body just went into the hallway, past the classroom door, and permission wasn't given to do so. All right, so we've got the student, the actor, we've got the behavior. What's the condition? There it is, the tail end of the sentence. During the school day. So the condition is we're going to be watching this student the whole day. What's the degree? What's the criteria? What's the level we think we can accomplish a couple of weeks from now, by a couple of weeks from now? Yes, you spotted it, 3 or fewer times. One more. Esmeralda will reduce her call-outs. Okay. So who's the actor? Who's the audience here? And you've identified Esmeralda. What behavior are we talking about? Oh, call-outs. Well, what's a call-out? I mean, it can mean different things to different people. Oh, there it is in parentheses, the observable and measurable definition. Speaking out during the teacher presentation of the lesson, the first part of the lesson. Typically, lessons go with I do, the teacher does it. We do, group of students do it together, and then you do, the student does it on his or her or their own. So, okay, so we're talking about the behavior happening during the teacher presentation. Well, that would be the condition. We're not recording call-outs during the we do and the you do. It's during the teacher presentation part of the lesson. That's the condition. And how much of it, what level? There it is after the parentheses. Presently, it's 4 times. We think in a couple of weeks, we can get this behavior, the calling out, down to 2 times. It's our best guess. We won't be held to it, but it's our next tier, our next level that we want to reach with that behavior. And then there's a section of your paper where you are going to talk about how you would use each of these strategies, each of these interventions with your focus learner. The first one there, you have a choice. You can do task analysis, where you take a complicated multi-step behavior and you break it down into its sub-behavior parts. For example, if you tell us, let's see, you tell your preteen, if you're let's say where you're living in a house versus an apartment or going out to the local laundromat, that within the house you've got a washing machine, and you tell your preteen, get your clothes together and wash them. That actually involves a lot of uh, steps that follow one another in order. So we're thinking about, okay, so let's analyze the task analysis. First of all, look for clothes that need to be washed. Next on the list, pick up those clothes. Next on the list, place them into the laundry basket. Next step, go down the steps to the basement, enter the laundry room, and we keep listing all the steps that are involved in that complicated, complex behavior known as washing your clothes. Okay? And if a student gets stuck, moving from one of these behaviors to the next, gee, we got to break down that next behavior into smaller sub steps. Yes, Jackson.
So after looking at the examples of part two, is this where we are going to reference the articles that we have been doing in our modules?
Each of these items that you see on your screen here has been presented in the learning modules. So you will be making use of your knowledge and applying it. Did I answer the
And we,
question or dance all around it?
yeah, and then we have to have a reference sheet of the articles that we source for these interventions. Is that correct?
That is not correct.
Okay.
I'm just looking for the interventions. If you happen to reference some of your material, I certainly look upon that positively, but not required.
Okay, thank you. So there is no need for a reference sheet. Thank you so much.
All right. So you have a choice between analyzing the task or shaping, which is sort of a general plan. And again, this is all in your modules. With shaping, you just set sort of short-term goals, actually, that student will show this behavior 30% of the time. Student will show the behavior 40% of the time. Student will show the behavior 50% of the time. It's a plan looking forward, but it's very general. You can use either one in that part of part two, task analysis or shaping. We also ask you to apply one of the differential reinforcement procedures. $20 term for a $1 procedure. In differential reinforcement, we reward or reinforce differentially. We only reward certain things. Well, it's kind of obvious. Yeah, you reward what you want to see, but there are different versions of it. There's DRL, differential reinforcement of lower rates of the behavior, that the student will receive a reward, reinforcement, if the student reduces the number of times they show that aberrant, inappropriate, errant behavior. An example of this is when I was teaching teens in a self-contained classroom for kids who have conduct disorder, oppositional defiant disorder, very severe versions of it. A lot of streetwise behavior, aggression, defiance, manipulation. Well, I'm thinking of one of my students would curse about 17 times a day. And we said, look, if you curse 16 times or less, I'll reinforce you. I forget what that reinforcement was. And he says, you're kidding me. I can curse 16 times and you're going to reward me? It's like, yeah, because 16's better than 17. We're building some restraint here, some self-management. And this is something you can only do in a self-contained classroom where I'm with these kids the whole day. You wouldn't be able to do this in your inclusive classroom, probably. But yeah, he threw out about 15 curse words immediately, Okay, but now he has to show incredible restraint to get through the rest of the day only cursing one time. And it was actually quite effective. We had to also teach him a replacement behavior. Well, what can you say other than some of those words? And we came up with a word that you may have heard me use in this class. We just made it up, snarzelfarf, or else replacements that almost sounded like the word we were trying to get rid of, or an approximation of it. And we even faded those out over time. All right. I'd say to make a long story short, but it's too late. And you see some of the other differential reinforcement procedures there, the acronyms for them. Another one you'll be talking about how you would implement it or how you would engage the student in it is self-monitoring. If we want to develop inner control of the behavior in the student so that we use less outer control, one way of doing that is to have the student collect the data and self-set goals and self-reinforce if they improve. And so we teach the student to data record. Some of you will be unable to figure out how to do that with your student who is on the severe end of the autism spectrum or is a preschooler, and that's okay, but tell me how you might use it for that behavior if that student's condition has improved, or as the student gets older and shows that behavior. Try to figure some way to talk about self-monitoring for your student. Then we'll be engaging in something we'll show you much more in depth in just a little bit, an ABC analysis as one of the ways we try to figure out why it is that that kid's showing that behavior. What's the antecedent, the A that's setting off that B, and what's the C, the consequence that's maintaining that behavior? Because we know people show behaviors for a purpose. They bring a benefit. They either bring something desirable to us, we're positively reinforced, or make something awful go away, or we escape an awful situation, a negative situation. It feels good not to be punished, to get rid of that negative reinforcement when we show a behavior to escape a negative thing or avoid it in the first place. But you'll be using that ABC analysis to come up with a replacement plan. Oops. Excuse me, my text messages are talking to me through my headphones. So we're using that ABC analysis. We are going to complete a behavior replacement plan. That will be explained in just a few minutes. Another assessment you're going to engage in is Rudolf Dreikер's mistaken goals analysis. As we try to get beyond the observable and measurable, which is actually kind of superficial, and try to get to what's going on inside the kid's brain. And mistaken goal analysis provides us with a bit of direction in that. If you're in my behavior disorders program, we go much more in depth into figuring out why behaviors occur and getting internal with the student. Oh, you'll be offering some suggestions to the home-based adults based upon the booklet that you purchased, the recommended booklet you purchased for kids of whatever condition your student happens to experience, and also what you've gathered from elsewhere, from our learning module, from your own reading, from your own knowledge base. Provide some suggestions for how the home-based adults can work with us, with the school, to help their child make better behavior decisions. And then at the end, you'll offer 3 other ideas for working with your student. Just anything that wasn't asked of you in the previous items, what else might work with this student? So yes, the ABC analysis. And here's an example of one. In fact, we're asking you, I believe, in part 2 to ABC analyze an event. And here's an example with Mark. And during the independent writing workshop, when all the other students were had their writing folders out and they were drawing their favorite activity and then putting a caption on it, writing a few sentences about it. Well, Mark wrote his, that was the antecedent, that's what's going on, what prefaced the behavior. And then he showed a certain number of behaviors here rather than just one. In this particular incident, he wrote his name on the paper, but then he started scribbling and got out of his chair, walked to the back of the room, started playing with some toys. So what's the consequence? Well, nothing from the educators in the room. It seems they let him go. And so the consequence was that he was able to escape the work that other students were doing and have some playtime. And eventually the teacher did intervene and asked him to return to his desk, but he threw some Legos. So with this one here, it's not one individual behavior, but it's an ABC for an incident where a few things happened before consequences came and the student responded to those consequences. You can create your own form, or I'm sure we've got one on Blackboard and maybe a link in the description of the assignment. But you can analyze your one incident on this form, or you can create your own form. If you're out there in the classroom and you're collecting information for the upcoming functional behavior assessment, where the committee is going to say to you, we need some data, quantitative data and qualitative, and do an ABC analysis too. And so in the days or weeks preceding that meeting, any incident that pops up, you are recording it on an ABC form and guessing what the possible function might be, although that is typically determined at the FBA meeting, where we consider all the information we have on a student and determine what we believe to be the function, and then we may even engage in some tests to determine whether we are correct in identifying that particular function. All right, so how do we use our ABC analysis to change problematic behaviors into appropriate behaviors? Well, If we've identified the antecedent, and it may be that we've used that form and we've been keeping track of all the incidents, and we say, typically this behavior happens when we present a worksheet or when one of our two paraprofessionals goes over to offer assistance, this student doesn't have a positive adult-child relationship, and the kid acts up. So, gosh, one of the things we can do is just prevent that antecedent from ever happening. If this student is distracted by others or talking with others, well, maybe we can change the seating arrangement. Uh, Setting events are what leads up to the display of the behavior. The antecedent is the most recent setting event. What appears to be the stimulus that sets off the behavior. But for some of our kids, there were other setting events that happened before that antecedent. They didn't have breakfast that morning. They were in an argument out in the hallway. Various things that reduced their ability to handle the challenges of the classroom. The antecedent is just the most recent setting event previous to the behavior, the display of the behavior. So yeah, we can prevent the behavior from ever happening. The misbehavior that never happens is the one we want to promote. Or we can prevent the rewarding consequence from happening, because every behavior is shown because it either draws something desirable to us, attention, affection, food, sensory stimulation, whatever it might be. It's positive reinforcement if we bring something desirable to us with our behavior. If we avoid something negative or we escape something negative, negative reinforcement. It feels good not to be punished. Punishment and negative reinforcement are different. One is punitive, one is rewarding. And another thing we can do is to prompt the replacement behavior that we'd like to see, saying this is a good opportunity to show that behavior. Of course, some students, perhaps most students and most humans, all of us, having to change our behavior pattern that's ingrained, that we know it, that it's part of us. All of a sudden, we're asked to change it out and put something else in its place. We need to practice that. Just like academics, we teach behaviors. First of all, we determine, can the student show this behavior? Has the student ever shown this new behavior that we're asking them to display? If they have displayed it before, we just want to see more of it, chances are we call it a performance deficit. They know how to do it, but they're not performing it, a performance deficit. Now, if they don't yet have the ability to do it, we ask them, what should you be doing right now? And they can tell us, but they've never actually done it. It's not in their repertoire. That's a skill deficit, and we need to teach that skill. Where for a performance deficit, we need to promote it, figure out how to get it to be displayed more often. So, had mentioned a couple of needs that people have, that we have the need to be connected with others. What are some of the other needs, the reasons that kids might show behaviors so that they can meet their needs, they can find what it is that they need at that moment? What are some of the drives, some of the purposes, some of the reasons behind behaviors? Let's enter that into the chat, realizing that not everybody may have something in mind or it may have been mentioned before you got there. But yes, work avoidance, that I don't want to do this, and they show the behavior to escape it. And if that behavior is successful, what type of reinforcement? They've been negatively reinforced. They escaped the negative thing, failing or taking the chance of failing. Yep, seeking attention, or some of the primary physical ones like food and water. Uh, eh, yeah, and various triggers that they might have. Now, what's a trigger? Well, it's an antecedent, it's a stimulus, it's something that sets off that behavior. Yeah, it could be, I need to move. I've been sitting in the seat. Think of how, kids and how active they are and how much we require of them to be sitting in their seats during the day. They may engage in a behavior, of talking out because it's too cold in here. The comfortable climate. The food and water was mentioned. Avoiding pain, whether it's physical pain that you um, pay off the bullies because they're twisting your arm, physical, or you stop contributing in class because somebody said, "Boy, that was a stupid answer." Avoiding that psychological or intellectual pain. Okay. Uh, yes, um, the most needed uh, human psychological need is to be valued by others. We need to be connected. We need to be part of a group, a valued member of it. And yes, we all need to be achieving, to attain mastery in important things in life, what we consider important, and oftentimes what other people consider to be important. Think of your hobbies and the activities you really enjoy engaging in. Chances are you're watching YouTube videos to get better, and you're reading about it, and you're asking more skilled people how you do that particular move. Okay, and that, yes, we all need to feel like we're achieving, that we're moving toward mastery. Some of the other ones mentioned there in our chat. Thank you. So how do we use that ABC analysis again to intervene? Well, we think about the steading events. Okay, what is bringing about this behavior? What is lowering this kid's ability to attend or to behave appropriately? How can we address those setting events? Right? And what can we do ahead of the behavior? What can we do to promote an appropriate response in those recurring situations? We think about, how are we going to teach that behavior, and how are we going to increase the chances of the student showing the replacement behavior? What can we use as a reward, as punishment? And what's the difference between reward and punishment? Well, according to the behaviorists, the ABA folks, reinforcement is a reward that works. We may say, "Oh, I'm going to reward this student with don't know why I'm blocking on it right now, but we say, I'm going to reward this student with this." Well, if it doesn't work in creating more of the behavior, it's not reinforcement. Reinforcement is rewards that work. And so, yes, consequence actions. What can we do to promote more of the appropriate behavior? And perhaps we build in some negative consequences for showing the inappropriate behavior, so that the student sees the benefits of showing the new one. Well, this is taken from, I believe, one of our exemplars for part 2. We have 7 different ones, different examples from previous semesters that I thought were especially good. The entire part 2, not just this particular form. But this is a form that you'll be completing. This one is on Mark, the kid who scribbled on the paper and went to the back and played with things. Well, what could we do to lessen the influence of setting events and some of the things that she would do with Mark and some of the ways we'd promote the replacement behavior, some of the instructional strategies. So you'll be thinking about this with your student. Okay. What are some of the ways that I can engage each of these 4 columns to create a heightened chance of the student showing an appropriate replacement behavior? You'll also be asked to fill out this form that you will display what happens when the inappropriate behavior occurs. That's the top horizontal boxes. And then how would we build the replacement behavior? Well, at the X there, what is the replacement behavior? And then how is the 2 lower boxes? And the second of the lower boxes, how are you going to promote that replacement behavior? What's important is that the replacement behavior meets the same function. If the student has a sensory need, and that's why the student's showing the behavior, then offering attention isn't going to work. The replacement behavior needs to meet the same function, the same drive, the same reason as the inappropriate behavior. And to at least the same degree. If the student doesn't get the same amount of payoff, or probably more payoff for the new behavior, why would I switch it out if the payoff is less? So 2 things to consider: same function and at least as much of the reinforcement. Just an example here, and you can again find them in the Part 2 exemplars on our Blackboard site. This one again with our student Mark. This presentation will be up on our Blackboard site tomorrow. And I'm thinking I can also put up the PowerPoint slides if they would be helpful. But yes, ABC analysis, as much as it is required by IDEA and Every Student Succeeds Act, it only addresses what we can see. It really can't get to the reasons behind it. So we thought, well, let's at least take a look inside, so to speak, addressing Rudolf Dreikurs' mistaken goals. And what we're looking at here is he's talking about our greatest human psychological need: to feel connected with others. It's all in the learning module, the ABC and the Dreikurs Mistaken Goals learning module, that we desire a sense of community. We want to be valued and be a contributing member to that community. The mistaken goals analysis became less popular with the rise of the ABA model back in the 1980s. But like the ABAers, Rudolf Dreikurs believed that all behavior, including misbehavior, has an intended purpose, a function. Our human most basic psychological need, again, to be accepted, to belong. And this is the source from which many behaviors emanate. Consequently, when a student doesn't feel this sense of connection with the other kids in the classroom, with us, or outside of the classroom with a group, patterns of misbehavior can surface. The misbehavior is a result of the student's mistaken assumptions about how to gain acceptance and how to gain social status within the group. So initially, the student tries to bring attention to oneself and then be accepted and valued by peers or maybe or the teacher. But if the forays are rejected, people see that attention-seeking behavior as not cool or inappropriate, and those forays are rejected, then the power mistaken goal results. And if we have more power in situations when it gives us, I ain't doing it, we say, you need to do it. I ain't doing it. We say, you need to do it, or there'll be a phone call home. We've just overpowered the student. If we have more power in a situation in which the student is attempting to gain power over us, then behind the back revenge results. Oops. Let me bring those up here. There we go. So we got the attention seeking, but if that doesn't work and it isn't valued the way the kid tries to belong to the group and get attention and be valued, then they say, you will treat me well. And the student, let's see, when engages in some behavior, and I, as the teacher, walk over and I start chastising that student in some way. And gosh, the student has just achieved the trappings of belonging. That I've come closer. When people feel connected to each other, they use closer body spacing. I'm looking at the student. I'm talking to the student. Well, I'm talking at the student, but it's as close as this kid knows how to come to belonging. And, it's better than nothing at all. But if I continue to exert my power over this student and the student feels rejected, then there's this behind the back revenge, perhaps destroying the bulletin board or writing your name or nasty things about you in somewhere out in the hallway, spreading rumors regarding you. And if we can continue to exert power over this student, finally the kid says, that's enough. I don't belong here. They don't want me. And I don't want to belong to a group like this that treats me like this. And that's where kids disengage from education and interfering with, interacting with educators in a positive way. Stryker's mistaken goals is quite aligned with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I suspect you studied that in your intro to psychology or maybe an educational foundations course. And in order to, while you can exist in all of these levels, you can have a pretty good sense of yourself, self-esteem. You can feel semi-connected with a group. To really self-actualize, to get each of these stages in the optimal level, proficient and full, first of all, one needs to have their physiological needs met. Like some kids' families have food insecurity or no heat in the home in the winter. These are things that prevent you from putting your efforts into other areas of life. You've got to struggle to obtain the food, and that requires so much effort in your life. Some kids live in neighborhoods that are unsafe. They may live in an abusive home. Their safety needs are not met. And while they can still feel good about themselves, that self-esteem, it's certainly harder to do so when you're the lower level, the more primary needs are met. But we get into the psychological there in the green band, the sense of belonging. Some kids have been bullied and rejected. Other kids leave one group to join another that they value more, and the group that's been left feels rejected, as one of our members went off to be with a cooler group. Some people struggle with self-worth issues, but having struggles at the lower levels makes it more difficult to gain success in the upper levels. It's not impossible, as many have proven, but certainly it makes moving through life much more difficult. So these are the things that are required. We've already talked about those, just listed here. And remember those 3 other suggestions at the end that are gleaned from some other sources. And yes, you will be glad that we are through with part 2. It is the most onerous of the 3 parts, but you can take great pride in accomplishing it because it requires so much effort and so much time. But soon it will be done. We'll move into part 3, which most people tend to think of as classroom management. We're going to break off into our breakout rooms now. You'll meet with a couple of other folks. So what do we do there? As I mentioned earlier, if there's a certain section of your paper where you could use some guidance, or you're a little bit unsure as to whether you're meeting the criteria, bounce it off the other folks in your group and receive some feedback, some suggestions from them. And just share when you first get there, spend a little time saying hi and getting to know each other, and then share that information. I'll be waiting back here in the main room